you want to be gentle on your body and don't say like, oh, I'm hurting, I just got to get through it, because I really don't think that's a smart idea. I think you got to go slow and let your body just, do its job, and be patient with your body and let it heal naturally.
Welcome to Resolve IBS and IBD Naturally. I'm Courtney Cowie, a nutrition therapy and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. If you are struggling with the symptoms of IBS or IBD and want to get to the root cause of your symptoms so you can take back your health through a whole person approach, this podcast is for you. Just a disclaimer that the information I'm presenting in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. You should always consult a qualified practitioner before making any changes to your health or medical regimen. That being said, let's get on with the show. So today is part 2 of my interview with Patty Picinich, my friend and colleague, who also has her own toxic mold exposure and recovery story. I hope you enjoy this interview. So yeah, I wanted to actually ask you a little bit too, because you mentioned even your kids were having some health issues. Was it everyone in your family when you guys were living in the moldy, or more so just a few of you?
So that's a really good point. My husband, he didn't think he was affected at all. But what's interesting is he was getting nosebleeds. We didn't tie that to mold, but after we moved out of the mold, they stopped. The excessiveness of nosebleeds stopped. So that's really interesting, because again, there's some symptoms that you don't even think about that could be caused by mold. So he felt like he wasn't affected at all, and later on we did find out that that was probably the cause. So, it's really hard to say. I do think that that the kids and I were more affected. I think I was most affected because I decided to, remediate on my own without a mask and gloves and everything. I mean, I've kind of put myself in harm's way. But I had gotten headaches every time I would go in the basement, in the crawl space. So that was like one of my symptoms that just didn't go away. And, I was struggling with migraines. And, now through once I did the gut healing was when I was able to finally get rid of that. But yeah, so it's hard to say. I guess that's a long answer to your question, but I think that you just don't know, because I think we're all affected, whether we have the gene or not. It just shows up later.
Exactly. Yeah. And so much of this is also just dependent upon how bad is the environment. Like, I truly believe if it's a really moldy home, anyone could get sick, right? Yeah. And then it's also just all of those factors that impact health that are sort of, I guess, subjective, if you will, like stress levels and, mindset and all of the kind of like the squishy stuff that like is harder to kind of like work with maybe from an objective standpoint. But I definitely think like even if your genetics are more robust and you have more resiliency to hold up well in the face of like toxic exposures, truly, though, if you're compromised in other ways, you've been leading a really stressful life, a lot of demands on you, like that could equally weaken you to a point where you could be on the same playing field as a genetically susceptible individual that's got, more resiliency habits in place, right? So,
Yeah, and to lead into that as well is, what's your diet like? Are you resting? Are you getting outside, getting fresh air? Like, so many pieces that we talk about as FDNs are going to be affecting how you react to these environmental stressors and toxins. So, there's so many factors. That's what we do as FDNs. We're teaching you how to live a healthy life so you can have longevity. And, those are so important. The diet, you could be going out and eating like, junk food every day. Well, of course, that's going to affect, you're going to get affected by mold more so than somebody else who might be eating a healthier diet and living a healthier lifestyle, right?
exactly. I agree 100%. And I also think like the reverse is true, where people who are dealing with biotoxin illness, whether it's mold or even Lyme or both, right? Like the sad truth is they do have to, in my opinion, work a little harder than maybe the
Yeah.
clients that come to see us that have like just gut stuff going on and hormonal imbalances. And not to like downplay that either, but just when you're dealing with a high toxic load of any sort, it is just so hard on the body. It's kind of like the reality of the more effort you put into trying to get the foundation solid, sleep, rest, clean environment, clean water, clean air, right? Like all those things, it really does wonders to help build back those reserves and shorten the healing process. Now, granted, getting well from mold, in my experience, can take some time, even if you're diligent, just depending again on your constitution, how well your body can detox, how well it responds to different therapies we might try, right? But I think the harder people are willing to work in terms of staying on a really, clean, I don't want to say like strict, but like disciplined way of eating for a while, at least until they get over the hump with the mold toxicity issue, it really does help, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that too, is for my journey was my detox pathways were so clogged.
Yeah.
So I had to do a lot of drainage and clearing out my detox pathways. And that was so helpful, super supportive because if you're clogged up, you can't detox. And, a lot of people, I know there's the buzzword of the MTHFR gene mutation. And, it's a true thing that a lot of people just don't detox well. And so that could be a factor as well. And I think that was super helpful for me. And just like you said about the diet too, is that you could be eating super clean, super healthy, but then if you're still living in mold, like you're not going to get to the level where like you're talking about that, you can have like a cheat day every once in a while, or you can start adding in, different foods once in a while, because you're still like the toxins are still coming in, and it's still that bucket of like, you need to get out of the mold eventually, or remediate your environment so that you can, not eat as strict all the time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's so hard about mold is it by its very nature will clog up the detox pathways, right? So
Yeah.
like we could
Yeah.
make a safe assumption if we ran a urine mycotoxin test on a client, we saw it was an issue, I might not even need to say run a Dutch test, which is a test we could use to look at detoxification or other testing, right? Like I could make a safe assumption this person might need a little bit of detox support, whether that's liver support or external detox support. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things you did to support your detoxification pathways, Patty?
Absolutely. I actually went the route of homeopathic. Picana is a brand that I really liked to open up the detox pathways. And then Cellcore was just on the scene. So the whole Cellcore protocol, but this was like, I don't know,
Years
like
ago, right?
10 years ago, probably, maybe like 8 or 9. Yeah, it's probably like 8 years ago. So they didn't have the robust foundational and everything that they have now. But what I did do worked. So, when I first started, when I was in New Jersey and I was trying to figure out what was going on, I would take like a drop of something like to kill mold or candida, and I would be so sick that like I would have such a Herx reaction. Now I can take stuff and nothing affects me. So I know that what I did to, eliminate the Herx reactions, like through the drainage between the homeopathic and then also through the Cellcore protocol, those, were life changing for me because I couldn't do anything to kill the candida or the mold, I also did this. I bought a sauna. So that was when I first started with the sauna. I could not even go in there either. Like I had to do really slowly. And that's what I tell my clients, like do 5 minutes, do 10 minutes, do 15, gradually, because, you don't want to Herx because that's a lot on your liver. And so you want to be gentle on your body and don't say like, oh, I'm Herxing, I just got to get through it, because I really don't think that's a smart idea. I think you got to go slow and let your body just, do its job and be patient with your body and let it, heal naturally. So you'll get there. It's just, you have to be patient and you have to just, listen to your body.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. Can I ask you a favor? Would you be willing to hit pause, give this podcast a quick rating, hopefully it's a 5-star, and even leave a comment or question that I'd be happy to respond to? This really helps to beat the podcast algorithm so that this free content can reach more people struggling with gut health issues like you. I appreciate your feedback and willingness to support this podcast. Now back to the show. Exactly. No, that's so great you brought that up. And as you say that, Patty, like I'm thinking of this and it's kind of funny now thinking back, but it wasn't funny at the time, like early on. So my big thing in my health journey was just a really, really bad gut. Like I mean, even lifelong as a kid, I had these chronic stomach aches, but it just really went down the tubes. And in the beginning, kind of like you, I had no idea mold was part of it, right? So I was
Hmm.
doing all these things that should work. And at one point I knew that I had this recurrent SIBO problem and I was kind of like, all right, I'm just going to go get this like prescription Xifaxan, rifaximin, right? Which is like the number one drug of choice to like treat that from my doctor. I remember taking it and it made me worse. And like, that's a
Hmm.
usually very well tolerated in a bag. I remember calling up the nurse and being like, is this normal? Like, I'm about to travel out to Washington, D.C., and I'm like on the toilet all day long. I don't think I could take this. And she just was like, are you nuts? Like she didn't say that to me, but I could tell based she like hesitated, like, are we talking about the same drug here? And I was like, yeah, like I can't take this. And so like it just is so interesting because thinking back, like the clues were there, like you're saying, right? Like this is classic mold. Like you take these things like, herbal things that generally are pretty well tolerated that we would use for gut, imbalances we find on the GI map, or even prescription drugs in some cases. Like 9 times out of 10, they're probably pretty well tolerated and depending on what it is. But like, it's the mold sick people that are going to have these really extreme, really adverse reactions. And
Yeah,
that can be a sign, like if you're listening to this and you know that you've become increasingly like oversensitized and also just having these really odd experiences and feel like you're going in and you're telling your doctor, like, I tried this medication you prescribed me and I am really reacting to it. Like that could be a clue that mold might be part of the struggle, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, a lot of people do struggle with that. And I think as practitioners, we're very educated in that, and we've been through it. So I feel like we're more sensitive to those people. And I think, like you're saying, was a perfect example. The doctor in the doctor's office is like, what are you talking about? And so that's part of the unfortunate, piece of going to a medical practitioner is a lot of times they make you think you're crazy or they make you think that you don't know what you're talking about, like you said. And that's the sad part about that system, that we come in and we handhold them and support them and encourage them and give them, you're not crazy, this is what's going on, we know that we've been through it, we know what's going on, and we can help you with it, and we can walk side by side with them and give them more support. And I do love just the cell core program, because it does have like foundations where you can go little by little and take baby steps through it. But yeah, I've been there. It's so funny. It's just really sad because they just like are like, what are you talking about?
Well, for sure, for sure. And this is actually such a perfect segue, Patty, because like one thing I did want to talk about a little bit, and I know you'll have something to say here, is just how being mold sick can cause actually like some level of PTSD for a lot
Yeah.
of people. Like it's very trauma because once you realize also too what's going on, and then you start digging into like everything you might have to do now with your home and how long it might take to actually like heal the body, it can really be overwhelming. And then the amount of just avoidance, like diligence that starts to happen, right? And just recently I had a client who started the whole mold healing journey, and she's like, oh, I found this Facebook group, and like, what do you think about it? It's run by blah blah blah. And I was like, well, if you feel like it's going to be supportive, then I guess I'm okay with it, but just take everything with a grain of salt and run anything you want to try by me, because again, it's like Pandora's box. You don't know what people are going to be saying in there. And I said, but here's the thing, like, just be very wary of a lot of fear mongering, because when you're in a group of people recovering from toxic mold exposure, it can go to this very kind of dark, negative extreme just because of the nature of what we're dealing with. And so, one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is just like, because we've talked about this a bit in the past, Patty, just like how in the beginning you do a lot of, I don't want to say neurotic things, because in all honesty, we still do them today in our home. Like one of the things is like when my husband and my kids come home from work and school, they'll change their clothes and put them out in a laundry basket in the garage. And then later, when that basket's full, I'll wash them, but with like the EC3 laundry solution, which removes mold spores. And so, like, maybe we could talk a little bit about some of that, like, early stuff you start to do when you're super, super aware and kind of feeling a little PTSD from the mold, right?
Yeah. So I always said that you get unmasked. Once you discover mold, your senses, you can smell it, you're more sensitive to it once you start detoxing, right? And once you move out of the mold, then you really can smell it on clothing. And it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because now you're just super heightened alert, which I don't think is super healthy, but
Right.
it is what it is, right? It is what it is. And we did the same thing. So I used Thieves laundry detergent, which has antifungals in it. And then I used borax, which is also antifungal. And then I would use like a chlorine free bleach, which is not bleach. So, and that's safe to use. So these are different products that I found to be helpful for us, but same exact thing. The boys, we lived in Arizona where, like you actually said before, it's not super humid, but there are monsoon seasons and it does rain there. And so what happens is a lot of people have that belief system that mold doesn't grow. So if there's a water leak, they don't take care of it. So there are quite a few moldy buildings in Arizona. And the school that my boys went to was one of them. So, they would have to come home after school and their football uniforms and their basketball uniforms and everything, we were playing basketball in the gym, was horrendous, So we did the same exact thing. And, I think when you're healing, it's necessary to do that. It just makes you feel better. You're trying to heal and prevent you from getting exposed again and again. And you just do what you can. You do the best you can, because obviously I didn't stop going into the building. I mean, sometimes I wouldn't go, which is a whole nother story, which was, heartbreaking for me because I missed out on a lot of the games because I just wasn't well enough. But now, the good news is now I can go into moldy buildings and I still do, I still go there and, just change when I get home. And I just feel more comfortable and safer that way. So it is what it is, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And we're definitely talking about probably a practitioner level of diligence. But honestly, I feel like once you've been through this and you've invested resources, it probably does behoove you to take these extra precautions if you really just want to be extra sure. Because, based on things that I've read, it is possible for mold spores to hitchhike in on clothing,
Yeah.
especially if you've got someone in the family consistently going into the same moldy building several hours a week, and the clothes come back, the mold isn't getting removed from the clothing because you're not adding anything to the washing machine, right? Like, goes back in the closet. Like, over time, if there's the right humidity and conditions, right, that could actually float around and take up residence in your house and become something. Like, I've read those stories, Patty, right? So part of me is like, it is a little bit extra, it's a little bit more of a nuisance to have to change your clothes if you've been out of the house for several hours. But whatever, at the end of the day, what does it take? An extra minute? You just run them out there. And then for me, it's super simple because I pay attention to that laundry basket. We run it when it's full, easy peasy, good to go, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I
Absolutely. I agree with you. It's just a way of making you feel better and knowing that your environment is safe. Like you said, you just don't want the hitchhikers coming in. I love that. I love that the hitchhikers coming in on the clothes is a great example of what is happening. And it's like you said earlier, that stachybotrys is very sticky. So people don't realize how sticky those mold spores can be. And I
Yep.
think that's the main reason why we do what we do. And you're just trying to heal the best way we can and try to do the things that we can. Like I said earlier too, if you can't move out, these are the things that you can do to prevent it from getting worse and to heal your body while you're in the situation you're in.
Exactly. Yeah. I know that another thing we do, and I'm not as like I guess regular about it, is just like fogging the house once a week is always my goal. I don't always do it every single week, but just again to kind of like, if there is anything coming in, like why not? Let's just hit it. And there's some great foggers out there, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tools I feel like you can use on a regular basis just to kind of help support the environment. Now, is that going to take care of the mold in a truly moldy home? Not really, no. It'll maybe like cut down some of the stuff in the air. But I think once you're in a clean environment, to have a little bit of a like obviously, like you said, Patty, I 100% agreement, like dusting frequently, because the more dust builds up, the more mold will settle into that. And that becomes a substrate for growth, right? So simple things. And it doesn't have to be a deep cleaning. Just go and hit all of the flat surfaces that are substantial, right? Get the dust off. Like that's a big one. Is there anything else you can think of just from like a preventative or even like travel tips, like for someone who's maybe in the early stages of healing and they do have to maybe spend an overnight here or go to a building for several hours? Like, do you have any tips you would give that person?
I absolutely do, and I'm glad you asked because first of all, I've never fogged, but what I do is, the thieves oil that, I use, and I'm sure there's other out there that are the same, but there's a lot of studies on it that it actually kills mold if you're doing it concentrated diffuser and doing it for 48 hours right after like a current molds, incident. And so I diffuse that in the home a lot, and I bring that with me to any hotel as well. And it's an immune, it's also kills germs, bacteria, fungi, everything. So it's great, if you're staying in a hotel, obviously, so you can prevent bacteria from coming home with you as well. But in addition to that, what I've learned is a lot of these hotels have ozone, and you can have them blast the room with ozone prior to staying in that hotel room. And that is super helpful for me. That is one thing that I really now I check to make sure there's windows open in the hotel room. That's a must. And that the ozone is accessible and that they will do that for me before I get there. Because they won't leave it in while you're there, but they will do it beforehand. And I find that to be so, so helpful. And because it's usually, and I also look for rooms that might not have carpeting because there are hotels now that aren't carpeted. So that's huge. But again, we're not just talking about mold spores, we're talking about the chemicals. So I actually ask them not to use chemicals in the room. Sometimes they'll use the chemical to clean, but then they'll wipe it all down with hot water. And that's, what they do. And make sure that they don't use any like laundry, smelly laundry detergent, because, those are, again, just more chemicals, and chemicals are leading to increasing our bucket of toxins. So, maybe you're not sensitive to the chemicals, but it can be a source of toxins that you're putting into your body when your bucket is already full, So I think that pretty much covers what I do.
Yeah, those are awesome tips, Patty. I actually did not know that hotels will ozonate rooms. So like, hey, I just learned something because we have just a ozone machine we'll do on our home every so often. Like if we leave for the day, every so often I'll be like, let's plug it in and just blast it, right? Because again, why not, right? It just gets rid
Yeah.
of it. But no, that's so great. And I definitely find too that it is common people that are mold toxic will tend to be less tolerant to strong scents and perfumes and chemical smells and laundry detergent smells and all those things. So yeah. So I think that's like really, really great advice right there. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
anything else you want to share just about like mold toxicity or what you feel is like super important when you discover you're mold sick and you're trying to heal from that?
I just want to impress the fact that it's super overwhelming, and we get that. And, I just really want to give people hope that there's, hope at the end. And it's not, like, oh my gosh, mold is this horrible thing. Cause, it can get really scary and really overwhelming, but I just want to, Courtney and I are here to tell you that we survived it. It's okay. And, one thing we didn't touch on is when you do move, there's things that you really don't want to take with you.
Yes.
And so I would say, anything that's in stuffed, like mattresses, couches, chairs, anything like even puffy jackets, pillows, those are all things you absolutely do not want to take with you. And then there's things that, you can use your judgment on, like clothing that's not puffy. I would say, wash it like 3 or 4 times and see if you can get the mold out of it, or the smell, I guess, and make sure that it's not contaminating your place. Like Courtney said earlier, you don't want to bring anything that's going to contaminate your new space. When we moved, I didn't know any better. I didn't take anything. But at the time I was so, so sick that I thought that that's what I needed to do. I think there is a threshold of things that you can take. What I will say you can take for sure, I know, is dishes, glassware, silverware, jewelry, anything that can be washed. I even actually was able to take my photos and, in the old days, they used to take your photos and dip them in water, and that's how they were processed. So I actually took like my big 8x10s and I dipped them in water and they came out clean. So I have them hanging out in my new home, like recently 4 years ago home. So those are some things that I would say. And if like there's things that you just can't get rid of, keep them in a box in your garage or whatever, and give yourself a couple years to heal, and then break them out and see how you do. Because that's the one thing I would say that I have a regret on, is that I didn't keep some of the stuff, because I do think that after years passed and after I healed, I was able to bring it back out. So that I think is like the number one thing when you're doing what you're doing. If there's something you just can't live without and you just feel passionate about, take it with you, put it in a box. We got one of those big, giant, like poolside deck boxes, and we put everything in there. And we just kept it outside on our porch, on our deck, and, kept it safe from sunlight and water and everything, and then revisited it later. So I think that would be a super helpful tip. And like I said, also just want to reinforce the fact that there's hope, and that there are so many practitioners like us out there that can help you go through it and, give you the knowledge that we have learned and help support you through it all. Because use us. Like, we've done it. We've been there. We have all this information. We have the testing. We have, all the protocols of what to do and how to do it. And, we touched on a few things, but, it's just not enough to touch on, not enough time to do it all. And it's super helpful just to have somebody with walking through it, because it is overwhelming. And, I think that knowing that there's people out there that have survived it is huge.
Exactly, Patty. No, and I agree with everything you said. I love the whole bin storage thing. That's exactly what we did too. And that way you don't have to make those hard decisions about the nostalgic items. You can just put them away and they're not completely gone. So, well, awesome. Yeah. So let's wrap up by having you share how people can get a hold of you, and, what the best way to begin the process of working with you is if they're interested in that.
Okay, so I have an Instagram page. It's called Patty Picinich Wellness. There's a link tree on there. There's ways to get a hold of me. You could DM me through that. You can reach me on my website in about a week, because it's under construction right now. So I'm working on getting it ready, and it'll be up in probably a week or two. So that'll be a way to contact me as well. That, I'm always here and willing to do a free discovery call if anybody wants to just reach out to me and do that, just to get to know me, find out, what I do. That would be the most direct way, just to reach out, and through Instagram or Facebook. Those are both great ways. I can also be found through email at pattypicinich@gmail.com. So you can reach out there as well.
Perfect. Awesome, Patty. Well, great. This has been so much fun. I loved having this conversation. I feel like this was so important, and I think people are really going to get a lot of value out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed this conversation, because it just brings me back to, again, like I said, to see where we've come and how, FDN has been such an instrumental piece of our journey, and how it's helped us both. And then just on top of that, just being able to pay it forward, like we said.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, did you find this episode informative and helpful? I'd love to have you leave me a 5-star rating. Do you have questions about holistic approaches to optimizing gut health that you'd like to ask? Please leave your question or comment below, and I will be sure to address it personally or cover it in a future episode. Be sure to check the show notes for any resources mentioned in today's episode. See you next time.